Hi, I'm Daryl, and today I'm going to talk about the hydrogen future of New Zealand. Just to be clear, I don't really support the hydrogen future of New Zealand for lightweight vehicles, and by that I mean cars, vans, utes, SUVs, the vehicles that weigh less than 3.5 tons. But I do understand that hydrogen does have some useful uh, commercial uses in perhaps heavy transport is a possibility, but like chemistry, chemical processing industries, that kind of thing. Okay, so um, just the a little while ago, a month ago or so, the government produced a public consultation document. This document, and what they did is they put it out for about a month and invited people to comment on it. And I wish I'd actually kind of seen it a little bit earlier. I might have made a submission to the government. It's the kind of thing I enjoy doing. Um, and so the document has a lot of interesting pictures and graphs and talks about New Zealand possibility for New Zealand's hydrogen future, including the kind of green production of renewable energy hydrogen and the potential for carbon capture vision of making hydrogen out of methane, which I think is a total loss. I think it's not a really great idea. And there's other ways you can make hydrogen from fossil fuels as well. I just need to put this onto single page. Yeah, that's better. Um, so you can have these uh, brown hydrogen sources, they call them. Anyway, my understanding of this type of public consultation technique is actually a method to skew people into a particular method of thinking. That's what I think it is. So what you can do is you can frame the problem and and offer a particular solution and get people to agree with it. And if you, the way that you write this document, if you write it in a biased way, then you can actually lead people to the conclusion that you wanted to provide them. Um, and at the same time, making people agree that by taking part in the consultation process, they got to a result that they came up with themselves, even though you may have framed the problem in a particular way to skew the argument. Anyway, that's just a thought I had on that, and I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So what I'm going to argue is I'm going to argue how this process is actually biased. Um, so this is where the paper came from. I just line up my windows a bit better. So this is at mbie.gov.nz, govt.nz, and you can download it. So I just found it by Google searching for New Zealand government consultation hydrogen, something like that, and I found it, and that was that document I just showed you earlier. Um, but my big argument against hydrogen is that it's not efficient for a transport fuel. In fact, it's not efficient as a fuel, and it's not really efficient as an energy transfer mechanism in any way either. Um, you can argue that if you had ridiculously huge amounts of free electricity, you could produce hydrogen and then you could truck it or ship it to anywhere or pipe it to locations. But if you search for hydrogen versus EV efficiency, what you'll discover is many graphs, and they're all pretty similar. I'll try and click on this one and hope that it loads. Um, and you'll get this efficiency graph, and so this one's quite nice because it says if you start off with 100 kilowatt hours of electricity, that's the units of power that are on your power bill, and you go through the fuel cell process of electrolyzing so you convert the AC electricity to DC electricity, then you electrolyze it, then compress it, transport it, run it through the fuel cell, and you end up with 23 kilowatt hours as your output energy, which is used for powering your car. And if you get the same amount of energy and you run it through um, liquidification process for making liquid hydrogen, then it will come out with 19 kilowatts of usable energy. But if you take the electricity and you run it and then you put it through a battery charger and use it in an electric car with regenerative braking, it will come out at about 69% efficient. And other people have done the same process. So I'll just show you another one. So here's another graph that shows the same information, and it basically comes to relatively the same conclusion. The approximate amount of numbers are the same. So if you use directly charge an electric car, it's 73% efficient. If you use a hydrogen fuel system um, as a gas in a fuel cell, then that's 22% efficient. And I think this is liquid fuel in a traditional vehicle. So if you use a regular petrol-powered car, the losses are just very, very high, and it comes out overall 13% efficient, which is the reason why it's actually better to use hydrocarbon fuels to make electricity and then use electricity to charge an electric car. That's more efficient. Even if you burn coal or oil in a power plant and use that to make electricity to power an electric car, this component is so much more efficient than adjusting the other components around the other way. Okay, that's enough on that. I want to talk about the Delphi method. The Delphi method is a method by which you can get good information from experts in particular subject fields if you do the process well and in an unbiased way. The idea of the Delphi method is you ask a bunch of independent people. Say you want to study a particular type of heart disease, you ask a panel of doctors who are experts to write what they know about that type of heart disease, and then you can get them to read each other's. So you get them to write their own idea first without giving them predefined information, and then you get them to compare their results to the writings of the other experts, and then you get them to write a new version of their document taking into account the other people's ideas, and you should come to a really nice representation of that thing that you're trying to study. But you can also use it in a skewed way. So if you seed the panel of experts with information first, such as a government discussion document that's intentionally biased or unintentionally biased, then you can lead the whole thing in a particular direction to get a result that would not have otherwise been the actual result. So that's Delphi method. And then we'll come to the thing that I actually think is the whole crux of New Zealand's hydrogen future. It's not New Zealand's hydrogen future at all. It's Japan and South Korea's hydrogen future. And the reason why is because South Korea and Japan have very low natural resources of liquid fuels to run their cars on, so they're massive importers of liquid fuel energy, so petrol and diesel and oil, and maybe even liquefied natural gas or LPG or propane, depending on how you're looking at which type of fuel it is. So in here, the country lacks significant domestic reserves of fossil fuel except for coal, and must import substantial amounts of crude oil, natural gas, and other energy resources, including uranium. So Japan's interest in going to hydrogen fuel cars is that they could import the hydrogen to power the cars. And New Zealand, if we had excess renewable energy, we could make hydrogen, put it on ships and send it to them. Same in South Korea. South Korea is a major energy importer, including nearly all of its oil needs. Second largest importer of liquefied natural gas in the world. So if we so now that we've discovered that these places where these hydrogen fuel cell cars are likely to come from are places that are interested in developing hydrogen fuel cell cars because they actually have energy shortages within their own countries. So that's of interest. And remember that Japan was quite keen on electric cars, why they had a lot of surplus of nuclear power electricity. But since they had their disaster with the 2011 tsunami and nuclear power meltdown, one of the worst industrial accidents in the history of the world, they're not so keen on that anymore, and they might find it better to just import hydrogen from another country and move all the risks somewhere else. I found this article here about uh, hydrogen in Taranaki, but I'll skip over that. And if we go backwards in time a year from that consultation document that I started the video with, we discover that on the 23rd of October 2018, New Zealand signs hydrogen agreement with Japan. Megan Woods, the Energy and Resources Minister, signed an agreement with Japan to progress particular types of hydrogen projects between New Zealand and Japan. So the government's already agreed to do the thing that they wanted to talk about in that consultation document, which is the export of hydrogen from New Zealand. Because we've already determined that hydrogen has no real value to many people in New Zealand, especially not in terms of hydrogen powered cars, because we have a beautiful electric network that distributes electricity nicely all around the country, and we already have an installation of electrical car chargers all around the country that allows almost any electric car to be driven almost anywhere in the country. And with a bit of fortification of our existing electric car charging infrastructure, you're able to drive any electric car anywhere you want without much hassle at all. And then we've got that one, and then I discovered that on the 9th of February 2018, so a year and a half ago, Maori and Japanese hydrogen pilot project for Taupo. So a project pilot uh, a project to pilot the commercial production of hydrogen using renewable geothermal energy has been announced. Taupo-based Tuaropaki Trust and Japanese construction company Obayashi Corporation have signed a memorandum of understanding to start producing hydrogen fuel, which produces no carbon emissions. And so, because they operate a geothermal power station, which just makes electricity out of the heat in the ground using steam, they could take their excess electricity. So at the time, so when they sell electricity into the mains during the day for everybody who's using power around the country during the day, but at night time, when the electricity price is very low, they could turn on their hydrogen making plant and make hydrogen and use the hydrogen for export into Japan. So that's how I conceive that their system would be that would be the most efficient way for them to operate that system. And so you can, so what is this on tuaropaki.com? They have this information. In December 2017, the trust entered a memorandum of understanding with Obayashi Corporation. So it's even further back in time. So we're talking 2 years ago now. So the plant will use renewable geothermal power at the Trust's geothermal power station at Mokai, 28 kilometers northwest of Taupo. Is that yeah, I don't know, just out on the countryside there. And what's it called? Halcyon Power was established by the Trust and Obayashi Corporation under the terms of the joint venture signed in Taupo in November 2018. Okay, So a 1.5 megawatt hydrogen plant to be constructed at Mokai in 2019, and the plant is scheduled to go into operation in 2020. And it's got a bit of the history of the corporation. But another thing I found when I was looking for that is I found that on hydrogen.org.nz, there's there's that Tuara Ropaki there. Um, there's all of these organisations already in the hydrogen system. Um, and I've also found that another project that's this is posted on the 4th of September. Hydrogen pipeline project gets government funding, so so the New Zealand government's putting money into this project, which I don't mind. Like there might be real commercial reasons why hydrogen's useful. But just remember, if it's something to do with Taranaki, then that's probably hydrogen being made out of natural gas. And it always annoys me if people just use hydrogen when you could be burning the natural gas. If you're just going to vent the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide that's created in reforming of natural gas into the atmosphere, then that's just as good as burning the methane if all you wanted it for heat to run a machine. But if you want the actual hydrogen for use in a chemical process, then steam reformed methane could be useful. So that's just a little bit interesting. And then Obayashi Corporation in Japan is a very large construction project, but this photo on their website implies that they have solar power farms as well, and they're into renewable energy. So yeah, so they got some, they've got a system uh, for renewable energy in Japan, which is good. And then I just wanted to talk about a price floor. Um, I kind of I'm not super awesome at economics, but there's a there's a type of price floor where you can have it so that a particular buyer can always pay a particular price. So do you remember there was the Butter Mountain in New Zealand, and I think it was in the 1980s or 1990s or 1970s, where the government kept paying people to produce particular things, even though it was economically inefficient. But another way I think that you can achieve a price floor is you can be the buyer that will always buy at a particular set price. So say electricity ever got below a certain number, a certain cost per unit, you could always buy the electricity and turn it into hydrogen. So if we built some hydrogen production plants around the country, which are already being built, then you can, whenever there's excess electricity available on the network, which makes the electricity price low, you can sponge up the excess electricity by turning it into hydrogen and then exporting the hydrogen to Japan or South Korea. Um, and so that kind of forms a kind of a price floor. And you'd be like, well, why would you want to do that? Because wouldn't it be nice for people to be able to charge their home batteries or recharge their electric cars overnight using cheap electricity? Well, you see, that would be really, really awesome thing to do, but there's something a little bit more interesting. So I'll just see if I can find my right. Let's just find. Oh yeah. Um, oh yeah. Here we go. Energy sector in New Zealand. So electricity sector in New Zealand. So um, New Zealand has a lot of renewable energy. 82% of energy for electricity comes from renewables. But the thing that's a little bit interesting is um, share of private sector generation. So 36% of electricity in New Zealand is produced by private companies, which means that the other, what's that, 60 odd something percent, 64% Who owns the other 64% of electricity generation in New Zealand? I wonder, I wonder if that's the government. I think the government owns the rest of the electricity generation in New Zealand. And so if you have a hydrogen producing system where you can export the excess of your electricity, that means you can raise the average price that people pay for electricity. And if you're the government and you own a lot of the energy sector, then that profit comes back to you. So here's a little interesting thing. Um, if the government sponsors these hydrogen um, production systems and then we export the excess of our electricity anytime the electricity is cheap, then you can keep a kind of a price floor, which stops people from finding that their nighttime rate electricity, it stops it from being really cheap. And so like in so if you look at em6live.co.nz, you can see the real-time electricity market in New Zealand, and you can see there's these big dips in the in the electricity in the middle of the night. So like, what's this at 3 a.m. or whatever, there's a dip in demand. So if you were producing hydrogen, you can stop that demand from dipping, but also it will increase what people kind of pay for the electricity at that time. And I just wondered if this shows you a graph um, of the prices at times. I'm not sure you can see that. Oh yeah, today's price per megawatt hour. So you can see at night time the price went below 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And so if you had these machines for creating hydrogen and you run them at nighttime or whenever the electricity is cheap, then you can effectively uh, have a bidder of last resort that keeps the bid price high in the energy market. And because the government has about 60% of the generation, it would you could probably push you could always push this price way up from 2 cents per kilowatt hour maybe to 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and you can sponge up all the excess. Then you can sell that hydrogen into Japan, where Japan and Korea have their shortages of energy, so you can sell it for, maybe you can sell it for 25 cents per kilowatt hour equivalent as hydrogen. So I kind of like think that's a little bit interesting. Remember, there's pluses and minuses. If the government owns the electricity generating generators and the earning money, then this is revenue that comes to the government, which means that maybe we wouldn't have to pay less taxes somewhere. We wouldn't have to pay as much taxes somewhere else. So that could be a benefit. But this is all just a interesting thing. And then economics efficiency, you can go to the Khan Academy and you can look at types of economic efficiency, but you want to look out for your dead weight losses. Um, anyway, I hope you find that interesting. So I'll just quickly rerun through what I found. So the government has a consultation document, which the consultation for which just expired, but the government's already got a bunch of agreements in place to push to go forward with the research and projects, and some of those projects started about 2 years ago. So looks like post hoc rationalization to me, something like that. Yeah, I just find it amusing and interesting. But for all the people that are like hydrogen, so the weird thing is that we see hydrogen fuel cell cars being advertised on TV and in the media and on big billboards in New Zealand, when everyone says it doesn't make economic sense to do it. It's not for that. It's for another purpose. So it's because Japan and South Korea really have energy shortages, and even if they were buying electricity stored as hydrogen and transported to Korea and Japan, that might be more efficient for them to buy that hydrogen at a relatively high price versus the cost of electricity in those countries, because you can just load it directly into the light passenger cars in Japan and South Korea and use it directly, so that altogether it might form a kind of market efficiency. But what I would be a little bit aggrieved with is if cheap nighttime electricity went away for all New Zealanders. So just at the point where New Zealand also needs to, we drive a lot. New Zealanders drive where, like, United States, Canada, and New Zealand and Australia have the kind of highest distances driven per car in the world. We drive a lot, and so as we convert to electric vehicles, we wouldn't want to set up a situation where a hydrogen export project directly competed with us charging our own cars using our own cheap renewable overnight electricity. That's a kind of thing that two things that are facing each other head on, which make me ask questions. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Tell me if I've got anything wrong, because, I might be mistaken in the whole thing, and I'd be interested to hear a kind of a well thought out argument.